Hello class, welcome back to Crop Physiology Lab. This week we're going to talk about plant hormones or plant growth regulators, and we're going to focus this week on an applied perspective of it. At this point in your university career, it's pretty expected in a 400 level class that you've at least had a brief introduction of plant hormones. We're going to talk about this, like I said before, from an applied horticultural perspective. We're going to talk about how you can bring this into the real world after you graduate from Chico State. We're going to start by talking about the importance of leaves, which is a little bit of an indirect way of going about it. But we see time and time again that when you're working with plant cuttings, this particular paper that you see up in front of you is talking about avocado cuttings. In this lab, we're going to focus on coleus because it's a lot easier for us to work with. But we see that leaf retention is really a big deal when it comes to rooting avocado cuttings, or when it comes to having new growth arise from avocado cuttings. We see in this particular study that there are 10 different varieties or 10 different clones of avocado that were rooted in a nice traditional rooting system, but their study had a little bit of a different way of going about it. It looked at the percentage of leaves that they kept on each of those stem cuttings, ranging from about 70% of leaves retained down to about 0%. And we can kind of see that there's a bit of an indirect relationship going on between leaf retention and death, right? We see that the more leaves retained generally from this table, the more leaves retained, the greater the number of plants that rooted, or the fewer that died. So we see this throughout here, that there's some time effect, there's probably some varietal effects, but overall, the trend is pretty clear. We see that in this regression for figure number 2. We see that at the end of the day, the greater the leaf retention on our x-axis, percentage retention, the greater number of cuttings that rooted, or the greater percentage of cuttings that rooted, right? So as leaf retention approaches 70%, you're hitting about 100% survival for those rooted cuttings. And then the question becomes, why is that? And that's the question that we're going to address in today's class. We're going to ask, is this a product of the carbohydrates, or those plant nutrients that are stored in those leaves? Is this something to do with plant hormones that are allowing this to happen, right? Because we know that the stems also have some of these carbohydrates and nutrients. Or is it the combination of these items? Now, this is a lab that I've asked you to gather materials for the past, I guess since the start of this class. You're expected to have the materials ready for this class. I'm going to go through how to set up this experiment, and I'm excited to see if your results end up matching my results. So with that, let's hop into the study itself. Okay, so at this point, we're going to look at the investigation protocol itself. We're going to talk about that protocol, and then I'll go through my own example of how I go about it, just to add some clarification. All right, so let's start with the protocol. We're investigating the role of leaf retention. That's from a carbohydrate perspective and from an auxin perspective in that plant growth and or in rooting. Now, we're going to focus mostly on how those nodes break and if we get some shoot elongation from that. So the first step of this is to cut 6 sections of our coleus plant. So we're going to cut these so that the stems include a node. We're just capturing 6 of these pieces right here, a piece that has a leaf on either side and a node growing on them, right? The next step is to carefully cut those 6 stems vertically in half from A to B in order to produce 2 identical seminodes. Now, this is done for a very specific reason. We're trying to remove the cutting perspective as a factor from this experiment, right? Doing everything we can do to reduce error. Now, fortunately, coleus has a really nice, easy to cut stem, So we need to do this carefully and safely. Please don't cut yourself. But it doesn't take a lot of force to break these coleus stems. So it should be pretty easily done in a safe manner. All right, so when you cut these vertically, you'll wind up with 12 seminodes. Now with those 12 seminodes, I want you to move them into three groups of 4 seminodes, okay? And those 3 groups correspond with 3 treatments. These treatments will be treated as plants or seminodes with no leaf retention and no auxin use, with no leaf retention and auxin use, and with leaf retention and no auxin use. Now, as a heads up with this experiment, I didn't ask you to buy a carbohydrate material so that we could mix the auxin and carbohydrate together. So we're gonna see what we get from this experiment. It should be interesting. It might not end up telling the full story, but that's part of what happens when we move to these virtual environments. Now, for your 3 groupings or your 3 treatments, I want you to remove leaves from the seminodes, that's your seminodal materials, from 4 plants in treatment, or your 4 seminodes in treatment number 1 and number 2. But do not remove leaves from the seminode in treatment number 3, right? So that should just match up with the table that we talked about earlier. With the seminodes of treatment group number 3, this says treatment group number 2. I will fix that, but that should show up as treatment number 3 in the document provided. Oh, no, I was mistaken. This is treatment group number 2. Sorry about that. Ignore that. So dip the petiole from the 4 seminodes in treatment group number 2 into your auxin, gel, or powder. Now, auxin is abbreviated as IAA. That's just a synthetic auxin. That's all it really means. It's indole-3 butyric acid. And that's what we're going to use as our auxin source. Now, with these 3 groups pieced together, we're going to place them into 3 separate bags. And these can be Ziploc bags. I'm going to use some autoclave bags, got some sitting around. We need these bags to be able to safely hold those 4 seminodes, right? 4 seminodes per bag. We need them to have moisture in there so plants can be happy and healthy, all things considered, seeing as they've been cut in half and all. I need you to make sure that you label each of the 3 bags with their corresponding treatment numbers. And you can either put these under lamps, or what I'm going to do is put mine on a windowsill. And I want you to record just observed changes that you see in the seminodes for each treatment over the next week. Now, you'll see in the homework assignment a little bit later that I really just want you to attempt this experiment, take pictures of each of these steps, and then record or present that recorded data as an experiment summary. So I don't need to see any tables made from this or anything like that. Just share your observations. Now, we expect that we have perhaps some carbohydrates, maybe some auxin available in that treatment 3 leaf retention group. Treatment number 2, that's the one with just auxin, right, with no leaf. We have the auxins available, but those carbohydrates from the leaf aren't going to be stored. In treatment number 1, we have no hormone, right, no auxin. We have no leaf carbohydrates available. We do expect there to be some auxin availability in treatment number 3. That's got the leaf retention. So let's go ahead and go step by step through this on my end here. Okay, now at this point in the class, we're going to go through this protocol step by step as a group. As a group, meaning me, and hopefully you're following along. In this step, you can use scissors or you can use a knife. I prefer the knife and cutting board approach. Just kind of like cooking, right? The protocol is the same thing as cooking. It's a recipe to follow. It's our way through an experiment, or as we say, as you have in the kitchen, our way through a recipe. Give me 1 minute, if you don't mind, while I close the door. Okay. So you might have seen to the side here, I've got my happy, healthy coleus plant I've been holding on to. At this point, you're expected to have a coleus. You've had about 3.5 months to get one. You can get one at a local a local garden center. It could be like a Home Depot or Lowe's. It could be a local mom and pop sort of garden center. I'll leave that up to you to find. But we're going to cut 6 stem cuttings or 6 nodal sections of a stem. So handy dandy knife. And let's see, what's a good piece we're going to cut and keep some ornamental value here. And this is a garden plant after all. I want it to look kind of good, don't I? Let's see. Oh, can I get 6 cuttings out of this? Possibly. We don't want to have too many nodes that have broken already. This might be my best material to go with. So I'm going to cut this section off. I'm using the knife so it doesn't clamp. If you use scissors, you'll end up clamping down and crushing each nodal section. That's not necessarily the end of the world, but here's a piece that we're working with. Let's see if we can get 6 cuttings out of this. I want to avoid sections like this where that node's already broken and growing as best as I possibly can. It's okay if they've broken and are moving through a little bit, but let's try to keep that to a minimum. It'll be harder to make those observations. So I'm going to break some pieces off, set those aside, point this camera down so you can see my kitchen skills at work. So I'm just going to make these cuts. This piece, again, all of these nodes have more or less broken, right, where that leaf material and that stem come together. So I'm not going to use this. This size material is probably fine, where we have nodes that have broken, but we can limit that as best as we possibly can. We also want to make sure that our pieces are well enough intact. I'll pinch this top bit, throw that aside. And I think I see 1, 2, 3, 4 sections here on this little piece. We're going to do our best to make that work for now. Okay, here's my first piece. Let's see if I can get four sections out of this. Being very careful not to lose a finger, because that'd be bad in this class. We don't want to lose fingers here. Ideally, these are as uniform as possible, or ideally they're identical. I think I damaged that top piece, so I'm going to throw that away. That's no longer part of the experiment. So I've generated 3 pieces. I need a total of 6 though. So I'm going to clean that cut up a little bit. We're going to keep going. Let's go back to our coleus plant, see what we can find. It's a good piece right there to get 3 more cuttings. I'm going to use that. Oops, here's the camera. Good enough, right? So I'm going to cut this piece into as many pieces as I can. And if we cut more pieces, we can go back through, take a peek at everything and see which pieces we like the best, right? So there's nothing wrong with making the most of the material that you got. And I've got pretty small stem sections here, right? We didn't have a lot of elongation on this, which is actually really good from a horticultural level. maybe a little bit less ideal for this particular class. So let's see. This is kind of a small piece. I'm going to get rid of that. And I think, how many are we left with? 2, 4, 6. I think this set of 6 is pretty good. I'm not crazy about how much node growth we've got there, so I might cut one more piece. My poor coleus plant is going to be so mad at me after this. Okay, I'm going to cut this up a little bit, throw this one away. It's just a little bit too much node growth. These are more ideal. These are more what we're looking for. This is maybe a little bit too far, but we'll see what we get from this coleus stem. Okay, just generated 3 more pieces. And honestly, these are looking pretty good. We're going to try to get our 6 most uniform looking stems. Let's throw that away. These 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, these 6 are probably my best 6. I'm going to lay them out nicely so you can see them. Should try to shoot for something kind of similar, but there we have it. Whoops. All right, try to shoot for something that looks a little bit like this on your stem, on your coleus materials. And these contain 2 nodes, 1, 2 per stem. So our next step, according to our protocol, is to carefully cut these 6 stems vertically in half to produce 2 identical seminodes from each node. So let's go ahead and do just that. I don't know if I can point this camera down any better or not. Not so much. But I'm just chopping it like I would anything in the kitchen, right? We're following our protocol, our recipe. So we've generated 2 halves that are pretty equal, right? Might not be perfect, might be perfect. It's okay. Goal is to have some stem on each side though, right? Ideally, in a true classroom setting, we would be doing this sort of work in a very clean and sterile environment. But I guess we're in the COVID world, so we're just doing our best with what we got. That was a good cut. I was really happy with that. Okay. Now, we've got 12 semi-node pieces, right? 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. If you think one of your cuts wasn't very good, go ahead and go back, try again. Make sure you're working with the best material possible. At the end of the day, I produced a good chunk of waste that won't be used in this experiment. That's okay. You still have your nice, pretty looking coleus plant to put in your back patio. All right, so I'm going to carefully, or wisely, I think is more accurate, I'm going to wisely divide these 12 seminodes into 3 groups. These are based on the treatments that you see in your protocol. Treatment 1, we have no leaf retention and no auxin use. Treatment 2, we have no leaf retention and we are using that auxin, this material here. And in treatment 3, we are, I'm going to move that knife out of my way so I don't cut myself. We are retaining our leaves, but we're not using auxin. So try to make sure your groups look fairly similar. Let's break this up as well as possible. Move that here, move that, move this. All right. So I've got 3 groups of 4. I got these 4, And if I move this wisely, ta-da, all right, easy as that. So with these groupings now, I'm going to go ahead and remove leaves from 2 of these 3 treatment groups. So pulling out the knife again, or your scissors if you feel more comfortable with that. And you don't want to cut this too close to the stem. You want to cut it up to the petiole, or the point where the petiole and the leaf meet. Right, so the leaf that you cut doesn't have much petiole on it, and the petiole that you cut, oops, if I can hold on to this, the petiole that you cut doesn't have any leaf material on it, but has some good petiole length. So we're going to do that for your materials in groups number 1 and 2. At this point, if you mix them up, don't panic. You haven't applied your actual treatment to them yet. You're really just doing some prep work, right? This is where those sous chef skills come in handy with our protocol. So those 4 are done. I'm going to repeat. I'm cutting it up for group number 1. We're just going to do our best with this experiment, right? I don't expect all of these projects to be perfect when we're not working in a classroom environment, but I do expect them to be attempted. All right, so I've got my treatment 3, got treatment 2, and I've got treatment 1. All right, that's good, we're set. Now we need to dip the petioles of these 4 semi-nodes in treatment 2 into our auxin. Now I've got a little bowl of water with me. It's just pure water, just straight from the spigot. Fun word to say. I might try to get a little creative, maybe dump the petiole just a little bit in water. Then I've got my petiole material, gonna dip it in my auxin powder. I'm going to repeat all of that for treatment number 2 only on those 4 semi-node materials. Making sure not to get too much of that node material covered. If you get a little bit, that's okay. All right, so it's got this nice little dipped material. Beautiful. Okay, so you see we've got treatment 1, treatment 2, and treatment 3 available to us. So now we want to put these in conditions where they can actually grow. We're going to move sharp objects away from ourselves, set us up for success. So we've got 3 bags. You can use Ziploc bags, make sure they have some air in them. I'm going to use autoclave bags. This is what I got sitting around, weirdly enough. I'm even going to bring a little bit of tin foil into the picture, or aluminum foil. But we're going to make sure that our treatment bags are labeled. So I'm going to start with treatment number 1. You see this bag has treatment number 1 written on it, if you can see that clearly enough. This is a pretty large bag. You really don't need much more than a gallon-sized bag. But I was feeling a little extra ambitious. So I'm going to chop this aluminum foil into 3 equal parts, 1 for each treatment. Just to keep everything out nice and happy. And let's see. I'm going to clean up my space just a little bit here. Put that up here. Got my treatment 1 bag. I'm going to put this chunk of aluminum foil inside. Hopefully you have a smaller bag than me sitting around. Having these plastic bags is little bit of a mess. At this point, we're done with our oxen. You can use this for your own future excitements, you know, do some stem cuttings, root some plants, do a little gardening. We're all some sort of plant people, right? Laying that out flat. Now we need to add some water to this little growing environment. This is really just a little greenhouse at the end of the day. You can see that better this way. Perfect. So I've got my paper towel now. I'm going to dip this in the same water that you saw me use earlier. Just this bowl. We don't want this to be soaked, but we do want it to be pretty damp. So I'm going to cover it in water, squeeze it out, do a little quick rinse. I'm left with just thinking about it, damp paper towel. This is for treatment number 1. So I'll put this damp paper towel in here, lay it out nicely, as flat as possible. Trying my best not to destroy my plant samples along the way. And now I'm going to put all of my treatment 1 material. That's the stem with no leaf and no hormone on the leaf. I'm going to lay these stem parts flat side down so that petiole's sticking up. And the stem has access to water this way. I'm going to do that for all 4 of these materials, all in the same bag. Being careful not to crush anything. So all those stems are face up. I captured a good bit of air in here. And I can seal it. Rubber band mine closed. If you've got little zip ties or anything else, feel free to use that. But again, we want to make sure that when we do seal it and move it around, all of those stems are straight up. There's no plastic bag touching them, and we're set. We're going to repeat this for your other 2 treatments as well. So that takes care of treatment 1. We'll do the same thing for treatment number 2. Right, that same starting procedure. I don't know that you need to use aluminum foil. It just makes me feel better about myself. The starting step goes through those same procedures. Paper towel. Dip that dry paper towel in water. Rinse it out so it's not soaked, but not too dry either. Unfold it a little bit. It's a weird camera angle, I apologize. Throw that down on your aluminum foil, make sure it's pretty flat. We're going to do that same thing, but now for treatment 2. No leaf, but with plant hormone. We're going to throw those down one at a time. Same procedure, that stem side laying flat. We don't want that bag to touch the petiole, so being mindful of that. It's kind of like yoga. It's very, very peaceful. Good deep breaths. All right, you've got these pieces in here. I would avoid blowing inside to try to get that air in there. I just kind of tie it up, put a little air bubble in. I'm going to use my rubber band. Very carefully tie that up. All right, that's treatment 2 done. We do the same thing with treatment number 3. This will be a little bit more difficult since you are working with material that has leaves on it. But again, we're just going to do our best. I should probably not have that water over top of tax forms. It's a bad idea. Okay. We're going to do that same procedure with the stem leaf treatment. And again, this is going to be a little bit more difficult to have set up straight, right? That leaf is heavy. So we're just going to do our best. If you have a plastic box that lets light through, that's not a bad angle to go about this at. We want to make sure that those stems have access to water, right? Makes sense. Okay, that's treatment number 3. My plastic bag is labeled. The leaf petiole combination is not touching the plastic bag. Everything's still sitting flat. Oh, I had one fall. Can you believe that? Unlucky. We're going to go and try this again. Maybe find a place with a nice little bump on that paper towel. See how that goes. Unsuccessful. Now, if you're smarter than me, you'll be doing this in a place where you don't have to move it afterwards. You'll monitor it if things fall during the course of this experiment. My advice, set it flat down, otherwise your results will probably not be right. Okay, that's that. Now, as the protocol says from here, we're just going to monitor and record changes that we see in this plant material over the next week. So with that, I'm going to stop my recording. I'm going to put these bags on a nice windowsill with a lot of light and track some changes that I see. All right, let's go over the assignment.